Travel nursing can bring you to places you've never been before. Tell us your story.
Good morning. It's Rita at the Travel Nurse channel. So it must be Tuesday. Yes, it's Tuesday. And we just passed Juneteenth recently. Today is the 22nd of June. And I'm happy to be here. And what are we going to talk about today? I do not have a guest today, so it's me again. But I thought just reviewing is always a good plan. And for those that are traveling or have traveled before, and for those that are thinking about traveling, we can learn from one another. So I'm thinking, let's talk about nurses that travel that like, oh, I wish I knew that before I traveled. Or those that are thinking about travel, how they can best prepare, what they can ask. You're probably working with a recruiter. And so have your questions lined up for your recruiter. And so those are some of the things I was thinking about. And I hope that's going to be of interest to you. And I'm going to wet my whistle here with my, my Disney cup. I actually didn't buy this. I don't know where it showed up from, but it delights my granddaughter. Because Mickey and Minnie and Daisy and Donald and Goofy and Pluto are all on the mug. Okay, so what do you wish you knew that would have helped you prior to traveling? If you have traveled as a nurse or a therapist or a technician or even a doctor, a nursing assistant, a medical assistant, all of these things, what do you wish you had known? Well, probably you would have liked to have known more about your contract. Maybe you read it. I know I read things, particularly legal things, medical reports and so forth. I read them, but I don't glean everything. I will read a book and be fantastically interested in it, and then a name comes up, you know, 3/4 of the way through the book, and I'm like, I think I heard about that person in the first couple of chapters, you know. So to read and reread a contract is going to be key, and to know that it's your contract. And if it doesn't have everything that you discussed with your recruiter, or if there's some things in there that were never discussed, you want to bring those up. You want to make sure you understand the contract and that you fulfill it, right? And that the parties involved, such as your recruiting company, your travel company, and the client where you're headed, that everybody's on the same page. The other thing, I think one of the most important things to remember about traveling is that you need to get paid. And so understanding how you get paid and what you need to do to get your pay, and what a good understanding of the stipends and the housing, these are really key things, okay? So if you traveled and assumed, or maybe the recruiter implied that you'd get a check every week or every 2 weeks. Oh boy, my chair's falling apart. It's just lopsided and goofy. Then that would be a miserable thing to find out, oh no, you know, you're going to get paid at the end of the contract, or it's going to be direct deposit after the first month, or something, you know, that really wasn't clear. That's going to be really important. You need to understand how you get paid. This is like a threefold thing: how you get paid, how the housing is taken care of, and your stipends, right? So there may be really a car stipend, a housing stipend. You just have to understand that very, very clearly. Is that money coming to you? Is some of it going directly to the housing, and so forth? So those are things that are going to be really important. And let's see. I guess in that same vein, let's add A, B, C, D is taxes. How will I be taxed? What is my responsibility? Is that going to be happening through my check from my company, my travel company? So understanding the taxes that you will pay. For example, if you're traveling out of state, you could potentially travel within a state. I mean, some of the states are rather large, like Texas, right? California. Some of those states are rather large, so you could travel from eastern Texas to western Texas, or northern Texas to southern Texas, or whatever, and understand how your tax is going to be paid if you have a property that you own, or if you don't, or does anything change. So you need to understand your taxes so that that makes sense to you and you don't make any mistakes with that, because that could be a nightmare. Let's see. Things you wish you knew before you. Oh, so maybe you were traveling to someplace kind of exciting to you. Maybe you were traveling to a big city like Chicago. Oh, maybe I shouldn't bring that up because their news is terrible lately. But okay, let's take San Francisco. I mean, every city is going to have, it's populated. It's a big populace. So cities will have the good and the bad and the ugly about them. Safety being a big factor nowadays. However, so maybe you were moving to someplace really exciting, and the recruiter, you said, I want to work in San Francisco. I want to work, as much as possible. I'll do full-time plus, and then I'm probably gonna, take one long weekend in the middle of my contract and really explore the city, or maybe go to the wine country nearby or whatever. And so you left a lot of it up to your recruiter based on their experience with other nurses and so forth. And you didn't do enough research and exploration yourself of where would be a good place to stay in the city. And you found the place that you were staying in the city not to your liking, uncomfortable. You didn't feel like you could walk on the streets day or night alone. And that's kind of something I would recommend. If you're going to travel and you've never been there before, do a little research, do a little exploration yourself. And for example, if you live in the state, let's use San Francisco. If you live there in the state somewhere, maybe in a more rural area, maybe in the middle of the state or whatever, maybe you could talk to some travelers that have traveled there. Or maybe you could even, take a car trip up there and look around and pick out neighborhoods that seemed more comfortable for you. So that would be good to do that kind of research before you travel to a brand new place. Any which way you can do it. You can talk to the Chamber of Commerce. You can talk to your recruiter and say, do you have anyone that has traveled to this facility and stayed in this particular extended stay hotel, or in these cottages, or whatever housing plans you've made with your recruiter? You could ask to talk to someone that did it before you, and then learn some of the ins and outs. And that would be really helpful before you make that big move for the next 3 months of your life, because most travel assignments are 13 weeks, which is about 3 months. A good one that a lot of nurses talk about that have traveled, and I've talked to them about, is like, I brought too much stuff. I overpacked. I had pounds and pounds of books, and I thought I couldn't do without this, and I thought I couldn't do without that, because you're living there. You're living there, and then you're moving back. So what do you absolutely need? Well, you don't need big things probably, because you're going to stay in housing that are more than likely going to have a television and a refrigerator and all the big appliance items. So you might want to ask about the smaller appliances. Is there a clock? Is there a radio? Is there someone I can talk to about the housing? The landlord, for example. Yeah. So let's see. What else? Yeah, so it's don't overpack. Don't overpack. I mean, it's 13 weeks, right? Kind of pack like I think I would say I would pack like I was packing for a 2-week vacation, because in those 2 weeks you get to do some laundry, right? Or if you're not a big laundry person, maybe pack for 3 weeks. But pack comfortably. You need a couple of pair of pajamas and a couple of pair of shoes, and your scrubs certainly, and then your casual clothes, and maybe one fancy outfit, one warm coat, one light jacket, that kind of a thing. Like you're packing for a vacation, not like you're packing to move for years and years. If that happens, if your travel assignment is really, really groovy, and you want to extend, you can probably make a trip or arrange to have more things sent. So I really do recommend not overpacking, and other travelers have said the same. Even the ones that travel in a motorhome or a van, or a vehicle that they can pack up in, it's not so much fun. I remember, when my kids were really young, that camping was a lot of fun. Thinking about camping was fun. Actual camping could be a lot of fun if it didn't rain. But the packing and unpacking is so laborious, and you've just worked hard for 90 days. So the unpacking can be, really a bit much. So think about, what you can do without, and yeah, but less is more. Less is more is a common thing for moving, particularly in the travel biz. So, oh, you know what? I forgot to open up for comments. So let me do that, see if anybody has any comments. And I forgot to silence my phone. Nasty, nasty. And I'll do that, and then we'll continue. If anybody has any questions or comments or suggestions for future topics, or likes this topic, has something they think they can add to this topic, please do so. Please do so. I put this pillow behind me, but it's kind of rocking the boat, and the boat's kind of rocky anyway. Time to think about to tune up my chair here. So what else was I thinking about? I had a list here. Let's see, like top of the list. And I think some of them are good for questions that you might want to ask your recruiter. So we'll get to that as well. Okay, these are questions I agree with, and I think are optimal for anybody considering traveling. Even if you've traveled before, I think the review is worth noting. Let's see if I can pull it up. Here we go. Okay, so one of the things I think is at the top of the list is, what is the expectation of a traveler? And if possible, whenever possible, if you're, for example, going to a telemetry unit, ask if you can have a phone conversation with the manager, the person that is working with your recruiting company, your travel company, and your recruiter, and all the people involved. They've done a lot of, they've had their conversations, but you haven't. And sometimes what they talk about and what you are interested in are two different things. So I think it's a great opportunity, and I would seek it in every case of traveling, to have a conversation with the hiring manager, the nursing manager of the unit where you're going to work, and find out what the expectations are. Do they expect you to, do they have good communication? What is the communication like on the unit? What do they expect of you? What kind of orientation will you have? Just get their feel. Actually, be a good listener. Say, you may or may not be new to traveling. You may be a pretty seasoned traveler, but regardless, you would, introduce yourself and have your conversation with them, whether it's a Zoom or a regular phone call. Speaking is, I do believe, better than texting or emailing back and forth. It's much more natural. It's much more organic when you're texting or emailing. Like when I text, even when I text, but particularly when I'm emailing, I do grammar checks and so forth. There's a level of professional that is less natural and less organic than a conversation. And eyeball to eyeball, of course, is even better, but that's not always going to be an opportunity if you're crossing the country and so forth. So, and it's, I think, pretty key to talk to the manager or one of the managers of the unit where you will be working, because different managers, even in the same system, have different styles. So if the tele manager isn't available and you're talking to the med surg manager, or the tele manager isn't available and you're talking to the ICU manager, you're going to get a different feel. And so I would work really hard with my recruiter to get that that discussion, that conversation with the manager one-on-one before traveling. So you can address, they can address your questions. If they cite anything that you think is going to be problematic, you can have a discussion right then and there. And one of the things I think would be important is, what is the orientation like? Will you be present there? If it's like a 2-day orientation on a busy unit, say it's a telemetry unit that covers 2 or 3 floors, and that's going to bring us to the next thing, floating. How do you manage that? Because each floor may run a little differently. One floor may have vents, one floor may not. You may have X amount of patients on one unit and X amount of a number of patients on another unit. Will you have a mentor? Will you have someone, particularly in the first week or 2 of your assignment, and particularly if you're not working a day shift where more managers are available? How does that work? And what is their expectation, so that you know that you can meet it, because you're excited to travel, your capabilities and your knowledge base and your experience and your talents. So you want to be able to share that when you go. So having that knowledge is going to be so key. Okay, that's going to bring us to the next thing, floating policy. I know in the many years that I was a manager, and then I was a manager for travelers, that that wasn't really discussed. And that is a huge, huge thing, because, okay, sure, I can float. I'm a tele-nurse with a med-surg background. I have some orthopedic background. I actually even have a little pediatric background. This is, of course, fictitious, but that's who you are, and you understand traveling is important for the client and important, with the constantly changing census on different units. Excuse me. So you want to find out what the floating policy is. And I did a lot of floating in my years, and it was usually between like a step down in a tele or a tele and a med surg, generally like that. And it was usually once per shift. But sometimes, I remember once it was like 3 times per shift. That was not easy. That was not easy, because you really feel you want to complete your shift wherever you are, and they tell you after 2 or 3 hours you're needed somewhere else to complete your charting and go. And you don't get a chance to you say, well, I told my patient I'd be back, at 7 o'clock. I told them I'd be back at 10 o'clock for their meds and their bath. They're like, no, we'll take care of that. And you feel sort of incomplete. You feel like you've sort of left your patients high and dry. Not easy, but you got to go with the flow. You got to work with your supervisors. And so 3 hours into your shift, you've got like 15 to 30 minutes to catch up, sign off, do your paperwork. And you are disappointed. You're kind of harried, but that's it. You just got to chart what you did, what you saw, and any responses you may have had in those first 3 hours. So you float. Okay. So you settle into the next unit on a different floor with a different supervisor and a different load of patients, and you get going. Let's say you started at 7, you transferred to the new unit at 10:30 or 11, and all of a sudden it's 4 o'clock. Your shift ends at 7. Sorry, they need you back on that unit. And you're like, okay, how much time do I have? ASAP, finish up your chart and get going. So now you're floating again. And so it's the real world. It's what happens. And hopefully it doesn't happen daily. It may. So this is definitely something you want to ask about up front. What is the float policy? What is the expectation of me and the float policy? And consider Is that going to work for you? Have you done it before? Are you up for the challenge? You know, these are things to ask. I think this is an important one, maybe not at the top of everybody's list, but because I did clinical managing for a while, it created a lot of hiccups in the bigger, particularly the bigger facilities. How do I sign in and out? Very, very important and very critical for those that work in bigger facilities and have, you know, don't always have supervisors and managers on the same schedule as them. So for example, if you're in an ICU and you work 7 p.m. to 7:30 a.m., your night supervisor may work 11 to 11. So she overlaps, you know, the evening and the night, but actually goes home way before you go home. She's going home at 11 or 11:30 p.m., he or she. And so find out how you sign in and out, because a lot of facilities, I shouldn't say percent. Some facilities do it one way and some facilities do it another. And so I'm thinking of a facility I worked with, a huge facility and a national hospital organization that had a completely different system for travelers than they did for staff. The staff were using Epic or something, you know, some kind of online computerized system, and they would arrive at work and sign in, and they would at their lunch period sign off, sign in. Everything was done on the computer. Some actually had their computers tied into the phone, so if you were on your way to the cafeteria, you could pick up a phone and say, you know, whatever time it was, 12:30, signing out for lunch, and then 1 o'clock signing back in for lunch. So that's great and convenient. And if you're at the desk and you can use the computer, great. If you're not, or you're on your way to lunch and realize you didn't sign out, you can grab any house phone and sign into the system. But travelers don't always have the same program as, do not utilize the same programs as travelers, because the payroll is different, whatever, for whatever reason, for however they track and trend. This is important to know. How do I sign in and out? And what if there's a hiccup? It can happen. You can be very, very busy, and your priority is to just get some food in your tummy and get back to work, and you missed signing in and out for lunch. And it's important, you know, it's important that they know what time you had your lunch and so forth. So check in with your recruiter. If they're not clear, then you need to check in with somebody where you're headed to work and say, how do I do my sign in and sign out? Which brings us to the next one, scheduling. How does the scheduling work? Do I have any options as far as scheduling? Because I don't really mind working 3 in a row, and I don't really mind working weekends. What I do like is a couple of days off in a row, because I'm excited to be in this town and I want to be able to do a little bit of sightseeing while I'm here, or visiting, or wine tasting, or whatever it is. So they need to know what you're capable of, and you need to know how they do it. And I know some nurses are really distressed when they have 1 day on, 1 day off, 1 day on, 1 day off, and then 4 in a row. It just seems like a difficult schedule to live with. And so knowledge is helpful because you can plan around it. Sometimes there's no way around it. You will get your schedule a week or 2 ahead of time, and it may only be for 2 weeks at a time. So you have to work within that realm. But find out first. Find out. You know, for example, if someone's coming to visit, you know, a spouse or a parent or a good friend or whoever is coming to visit you, you want to be able to plan a little bit, you know. And so if you have a 2-week schedule and it's a decent one with 2 or 3 days off together, that'd be the time to plan the visit. What other questions are important to those who are traveling? Well, certainly you need to know the hours, right? If you're used to working long-term facilities, skilled facilities, rehab facilities, generally those are 8-hour shifts, but it just might be that this particular facility works 12s or 10s. So you need to be very, very clear about that. That should absolutely be in your contract, and it should match up with the contract that your clients are getting. Hello, somebody is saying hello, but I don't know who they are. So hello, thank you for checking in to the Travel Nurse channel. Anybody that wants to check in, let me tell you, we're live. We're streaming live on Facebook. We're also on YouTube, and then we archive. So many, many, many of these shows that we've done over the years, you can go back in the archives, and they usually will have some kind of heading, so it lets you know what we're talking about. Hi, Nisha. Nisha's saying hello. Nisha, let's see. Oh boy, I think it's time to check my eyesight again. Nisha Bardwaj, thank you for checking in. I hope you're a travel nurse. If there's anything you'd like to talk about, let me know. Or if you'd like to talk live with me sometime, we can do that as well. Let's see. Traveling. Oh, traveling. Some of the things. Yeah, knowing your hours is going to be very, very key. And knowing your availability. So if you're willing to do overtime, the facility you're working out should know that ahead of time. And with, so many of my friends that have been working through all this COVID pandemic have really gotten the stress and strain, the emotional and physical and mental toll has taken on them, are probably not wanting to do too much overtime at this point. So if it's something you're up for, it'd be great to let the client know through your recruiter, or when you have your chance to talk to the supervisor, the manager of your unit, that I am okay doing some overtime. The most I can do is 4 12s in a row. The most I can do is 6 8s in a row. Whatever your capability is, and that you function okay with, that's great. But I remember nurses doing marathons, just 12 after 12 after 12, and I thought it's time. I would check in with them personally and say, look, I see you've just done your 5th 12. It's time for you to take a break, don't you think? They're like, no, I'm good. I'm still good, And so we would assign them if they said that. But be careful. You can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself. So the hours is important to ask about. There's so many. Gosh, this list can go on and on. I would like to know, if I were a traveler, Nisha, how are you safe? Home safe? Yes, I am safe. My family's safe. Our COVID numbers are way down. I'm in Southern California. Our hospitals are seeing declines in admissions. We still have some COVID cases going on, but a lot of them aren't the critical ones that we saw in the beginning. So yeah, everything is safe here in Southern California. Thanks for checking in, Nisha. This is a question I would want to ask, because it doesn't matter if you're a seasoned traveler, if you're new to traveling, if you are a seasoned nurse with lots of experience in many areas, maybe ICU, telemetry, maybe you floated to ER, maybe you've done some psych nursing, maybe you've done some rehab, whatever all these experiences brought to you, you're still in somebody else's house per se, right? You're in a new city, in a new unit, in a new hospital with different processes and so forth. And so I would like to know how many staff members and how many travelers I'll be working, because I've heard this from other travelers, that they showed up and nearly everyone on the unit was a traveler. And that's kind of rough. Like, this is, a homemade example. But if someone comes to my house and they're helping me, maybe we're having a dinner party and they want to help me get the coffee cups out and so forth. We're up to dessert. And my coffee mugs happen to be above where my coffee pot is, which is great. And I usually have a big tea kettle there with lots of water. So you can just pour the water right into the coffee maker. So everything's right there. And spoons, coffee mugs, sugar, all those things. and somebody wants to help me, but this is my company, right? So I want to bring out, my special mugs or my special sugar and creamer. And so not the stuff I use every day, and they happen to be over in some other special cupboard and so forth. So it's nice to have people. So I use that little, visitors helping you with coffee and dessert and so forth, as opposed to being on someone else's unit. Many, many, many times the dirty utility is right next door to the clean utility, or across the hall, or nearby. But it just happens it's not where you're traveling. So it's sort of nice to have some base staff and some good communication with base staff, to make things go smoothly. So yeah, it would be nice to know how many travelers are going to be on the unit where you're headed, so that you could plan ahead, and if there are other travelers on a unit, that's kind of cool too, because then you become your own community, Oh, I'm a traveler from Ohio. Oh, I'm a traveler from Florida, or Minnesota, whatever. And that can work out pretty terrific, actually. But just knowing these things makes such a big difference. Let's see. See if I'm seeing. Oh, Nisha, you're very sweet. She's saying thank you so much for replying. Yeah, of course, of course. Any questions, any concerns, anything you want to offer to the travel community, that's what we're here for. We're here to, to share what we know, to learn a little bit, to offer some, to commiserate, because times have been a little unusual, right? Yeah, so what we're talking about right now are things to prepare, questions to ask. There are a bunch of questions you might want to ask of a, oh, good night, you must be far away. Yeah, it's morning hours here. Yeah, Nisha, so nice of you to check in. Let me see. Yeah, we're in Southern California, and Travel Nurse Channel. We're based in Southern California. I'm originally from New York, so I moved across the country, and but this is a travel nurse channel for all those that travel in healthcare, and I don't have information or too much information on international nurse travel. I have one episode in the archives that gave some sites and numbers for those that are interested in international travel, which is a great thing to do. But my experience and my nursing has been primarily in the States, and also my clinical management of travel nurses has been within the United States. So so I think some other important questions have to do with your agency. So most nurses, most travelers work with a specific travel agency and travel nurse agency or travel healthcare agency. We've had episodes on that. There are many. There are well over 300 agencies, and some are more specific to nursing. Some are broader. Some of the bigger countries like cross country and some of the big IA and so forth, they work with all kinds of groups. They work with ultrasound, they work with doctors, they work with administrators, they work with nurses, therapists, occupational. Then there are companies that are really specific. They work just with radiology techs or just with x-ray, well, radiology or x-ray techs. But that realm, interventional radiology, x-ray techs, all of those in that realm. That could include ultrasound and CAT scan techs and so forth, So there are agencies that work with really specific groups. So find out about your agency, get a little history. Are they new? New is not necessarily bad, but some have a lot of history, some have a shorter history, but is it a positive history? What are the clients saying about them? What are the travelers saying about them? So find out about them. You can ask them directly. You could do your homework. You could go online and find out where that agency places nurses. And that's another thing. If you're particularly interested in a certain place like New York or a big city, then I'm trying to think of big city. I don't know why Chicago's on my mind. Probably because they've been on the news. We really have to send some good positive thoughts there. But anyway, what I have found too, talking to a lot of travelers, is that they travel if they've done a few travel assignments. They like to follow their recruiter. Wait, Nisha's saying good night. Where am I from? Can you send me your number? Oh, yeah, you can call anytime. 800-737-6518. 800-737-6518 is the Travel Nurse channel. And if we're in a time difference, we'll set something up if you want to talk about anything to do with traveling. Yeah. Okay. So where was I? Oh, recruiters. So a lot of travelers follow their recruiters. And so maybe a recruiter was with a company for a long time and they made a move to a newer company. That's understandable. And maybe you want to stick with that recruiter. So you just stay in contact with your recruiter because they did answer all your questions. They were helpful when you were on the job and suddenly you had a plumbing problem in your housing or whatever the issue was when you decided, there were some issues, some communication issues, or you were there for a week and you still hadn't met the manager. Whatever the issue is, that your recruiter was very responsive and timely in helping you out with your questions and your concerns. That's a recruiter you might want to work with again, right? But I think those are questions to ask. Certainly the first one I thought, I'll reiterate it for anybody tuning in late. Oh, Nisha needs that number. Okay, I'll say it slowly. To reach the Travel Nurse channel anytime, it's 800-737-6518. 800-737-6518. Thanks. Let's see. Oh, okay. So we're talking about companies and recruiters and finding out their history and what works for you and what works for them. It could be that you really like working with this recruiter, but they don't staff the city you want to go to. You want to travel to Miami, for example, and they just don't have any contracts in Miami. They may have contracts in Tampa or Jackson or some other part of Canada. I mean, Canada. My mind is all over the place. Florida. So what you might say to the recruiter is, oh, I just really want to go to Miami. I have an aunt down there. I'm so interested in seeing the flora and the fauna and the city and the food. And I'm just really interested in Miami. And I know that there's lots of assignments. I'm actually really interested in working with geriatric patients, and I know they have a lot of long-term facilities there and hospitals there. So do you have any recommendations? Well, that recruiter might, I have a friend who's one of her darling daughters is a recruiter. It's not so much healthcare. I actually don't know. I know she's very busy and they love her. Why wouldn't they? She's brilliant and she's just great person. But she gets calls sometimes from her clients or her travelers or the people she's recruiting, and they want something that isn't her realm. And so she will gladly tell them, say, look, I can put out some feelers, but I'm going to direct you to someone that I know is an expert in that area, right? So a great recruiter will be willing to do that. So if you've traditionally traveled as a med-surg nurse, but you also have background in rehab, or you have background in geri care or geri psych care, whatever your background is, and you've been traveling with this recruiter on med-surg assignments, you've done a couple of travel assignments, they've worked out great, you love your recruiter, go, I want to get back to my geri psych. It's been a couple of years and I want to continue to keep that up, and I really want to do it in Miami. And she'll go, oh no, I just don't have any clients in Miami. Are you interested in Tampa? And you're not. You want Miami. And so maybe they can direct you. So Nisha's still having trouble with the number. It's 800-800. Let's start from the beginning. 800-737-6518. It looks like you got a few two numbers in there. So it's 800-737-6518. Thanks for checking in, Nisha. Let's see. What else are good questions to ask? You know, you could ask, and I actually think this is not a bad question, particularly if you're new to traveling and you want to go someplace where there's a really good rapport between the travel company and the client, the hospital, or the facilities that they staff. What cities, what hospitals are you staffing the most? That'd be kind of cool. That'd be kind of a cool place to start, because then you know there's relationships, and it really does come down to relationships in travel and in so many things, in life. So I think that would be an important question to ask. What else? Oh, extensions. We talked a little bit about extending contracts, and that often can happen. And it may or may not work out, but you can always see what works best for you, and it may work out. So say you've done your first travel assignment, you're 10 weeks into your 13-week assignment, things have gone well, you've met other travelers, you've met staff people, you have a really good feel for the place and communicating with the teams, and the manager comes and says, we'd really like to extend your contract, and you think that you have your recruiter is actually working on another assignment. So let's say it's June right now, that your contract ends July 1st. And you know, you talked to your recruiter and you said, I'm going to be available. I'm going to go home for a week or two, but I'm going to be available right after that. And these are the places I'd like to go. And you know, your recruiter's working on that. So you can't give an enthusiastic yes to the manager until you check in with the recruiter and make sure that there aren't some other commitments going on already. Maybe you've already talked about another city and you've talked to your family about it and so forth. So you've got to make some different arrangements. But say you're on assignment, you're 10 weeks in, and they want to extend you, and you're very much interested. You're more than 50% interested. You say to the manager, thank you so much. I am quite interested. Can you give me a few days to get back to you? And the manager, you know, acquiesces, and that's good, and you've got a little time, and then you want to check in with your recruiter and your family and so forth. They want to extend and find out how long they want to extend for. Because if you were interested in another travel assignment, another 90 days, that may work out great, but you were also interested in taking some time off. So maybe they need you right away, and maybe you can work into that 13-week contract a week off, you know. If that works, you know, so these are the questions to ask. Maybe you want to extend, and maybe you really do want to extend for another full contract. But maybe when you were planning your next travel assignment, you had a wedding coming up, so you already had some time blocked out. So all of those things to consider. Take your time, do what works best for you, because if you're a happy camper, usually the people that you are working with will be happy with you as well. So it goes that way. Yes, Nisha, I will get in touch with you after the show and get you the numbers that you're asking me for. But I'll stop now for a minute to tell everybody you can get in touch with the Travel Nurse Channel by going to our website, www.travelnursechannel.com. You can email me at rita, RITA at travelnursechannel.com. And you can call anytime, 800-737-6518. So don't worry, Nisha, I'll get in touch with you. I know those numbers are mixed up for you. I think there might be a little language barrier or audio problem. So, but thanks for checking in. Let's see if anybody else is checking in. I think we're good. So questions. Yeah. We've talked about the specialties that are most often in demand, and they may or may not be your specialty, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a travel assignment out there that's going to work for you. So yeah, the bigger needs are often ICU, tele. What are my dogs going crazy about? There must be some deliveries happening. Yeah, ICU is always in demand. Med-surg tele, always in demand. Labor and delivery is another one. ER, a lot of those areas in demand. But if you work in a cath lab, if you work in interventional radiology, if you work in postpartum, if you work in an oncology unit, if you are a clinic nurse, if you work in a medicine clinic, or you work in an orthopedic clinic, there are jobs for you without a doubt. I have a young friend, and she was thinking about traveling. She's a CNA, and she's in nursing school, and she was thinking about a travel assignment, and she was, thinking of all the angles and asking lots of questions, and she was really concerned that her employer now that she's happy to work with couldn't hold her position for the 90 days that she traveled, and she really wanted to stick with them, as she worked her way through nursing school and so forth. And I said, I don't think you should worry. I said, the needs are tremendous. The needs for good employees are tremendous. And, I said, if you really want to try and travel, I said, I think it's a wonderful thing. And not worry so much about coming back to your job, because more than likely there are going to be positions there when you do come back. So I've kind of chatted for a long time here, and I don't see any more questions coming up. What other key things did I want to talk about? Extending, yeah, that's a big one. Extending. Let's see. Housing is important. Orientation, questions about orientation are important. Let's see, my dears. Yeah, travelers on your unit, extending travel assignments, hours. Oh, yeah. The resources. Yeah, this is important, I guess. Yeah, that's not always a pleasant thing to talk about, but so let's talk about just resources in general. Many of your recruitment companies, and if you've been following your recruiter, you want to check if they are with a different company, what resources they have available. But when I was a clinical manager for an agency, a travel agency, a big one, we had nurses available round the clock for issues. We had billing, and we had all kinds of resources for our travelers. And they had numbers they could call. If they didn't, there was always a hotline. They could call the hotline. There was, things posted for them and so forth. They got a contract book with lots of information in it. So study guides, all kinds of things, because traveling to one facility is always going to have different processes and information than another. So Stanford, for example, Stanford Hospital in Northern California, big training hospital, high standards and so forth, had a whole different protocol than, say, maybe a small private facility in another part of the state and so forth. So lots of information, lots of resources, and so you could call. Some of those hotlines were 24 hours. some of them not. And a lot of times if there was an issue on the unit, you might want to talk directly. If you were having trouble, say, with the pharmacy or so forth, that miscommunications, and it was more than once, and you tried to talk to your supervisor and you're a night person and you kept missing each other, and a few days went by and boom, another glitch with a pharmacy order and so forth. So you could either use the chain of command, go to the next supervisor, the manager, or the house supervisor and talk about it, or you could call your recruiter and say, who can I talk to about this? And they might know just the person for you to talk to. If it were something maybe with another staff member and you were frustrated and you used all your best communication skills and still this staff member was holding back information and so forth, you might want to talk to a clinical manager like I was for suggestions and maybe the right person to talk to, or for someone to mediate and so forth. There's just different issues that come up. And one of the issues, and none of them are pleasant, but trying to ignore a problem is like trying to ignore a wound or a broken bone. They don't often fix themselves. They need a little attention. So an issue might be that you got injured on the job, or you got sick on the job, or God forbid, you got COVID, you started to have COVID signs. You need to know what to do and who to see, and you need it pronto, right? So whether it's employee health or you're directed to a specific health program for yourself, you need to know how to take care of those issues and who's available to help you with that. And I would always start with my recruiter, honestly. That's the person you have the strongest relationship with, that helped you plan this whole travel assignment, that answered all the questions in the contract and or directed you to those who could answer it. It might be somebody in payroll or billing and so forth. So yeah, there's advice out there, and there's the right person to give advice, and a great recruiter will know when they are the person to help you and when they need to direct you to someone else. So there's some of the ins and outs of getting ready for travel or getting ready for your next travel assignment. I hope they're helpful. And believe me, I'm working on a guest that will have other exciting things to talk about. And I thank you all for tuning in. I thank you all for the hard work you do. Nisha, don't you worry. I'm going to get back to you with numbers and phone numbers and ways to contact the Travel Nurse channel. And sign off for now. Have a beautiful week and enjoy getting ready for July 4th, because I think we are going to be able to take our mask off, get some sun, and see some people. That's the way things are looking in Southern California. So isn't that nice? So take care of yourselves out there. I'll send you off with my favorite little brand of a nurse and a sidecar. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Travel nursing can bring you to places you've never been before. Tell us your story.